Good morning.
Good morning.
And welcome to the Humanist Club in the Villages. I'm Goldsmith, and I'm really glad to be here with you today. The early start today is not a dry run for daylight savings time. Okay, it's because our speaker had an event occur that requires him to be out of here on his way back to Ocala by 10:30. So I'm going to save announcements and schedule issues until after his talk today. I'd appreciate it if you'd stick around at 10:30 because there are a couple of announcements that we really want you to hear today before you go. Dr. Jose Gaudier is a practicing neurologist in Ocala, but more than that, he's kind of a polymath with regard to his command of many, many issues on which he can speak. And I look forward to his presentation today, and I did get clearance from my spouse to be able to attend.
Thank you so much, Bo, and thank you for having me here today. Is that too much echo, or are you okay? Thank you for the light. So, my first disclaimer, I'm not an expert in sex. All I know about the practical aspect of sex, I learned from my wife. Nobody that knows a lot about sex is going to take his time to research all this data. Actually, the way I came to get interested in this topic, I was the vice president of the Medical Society in Ocala, and I was in a meeting with the president looking for topics to talk that particular year. So my friend, the president, he said, you know, I've been trying to get a talk on sex, but there's a neurologist that talk about sexual dysfunction. There's a gynecologist that talk about sexually transmitted diseases. I mean, who's going to come to that kind of topic? And I was trying to get something fun on sex, and I was like, I thought it was a crazy idea for a medical meeting, and afterwards I was like, I think I can do that. So I have through the years studied a little bit about the biology, the psychology, the physiology of sex, and what I'm going to give you this morning is hopefully a relaxed and entertainment overview of some facts about sex, covering hopefully several aspects of it. There's going to be some topics like when you talk about sex that somebody may get offended. That's definitely not my intention. My intention is that you enjoy a good conversation and give you something to talk about and hopefully get more cozy with your husband or wife when you get back home today, now that you have to wake up early this morning. Get your beepers off and cell phone off, and we're ready to start. So, sex has always been a taboo topic. People like to talk about sex, and there's some good things about it. We don't like our pre-teenage kids to be talking about sex with their friends. There's some place, there's some time, there's some ways of doing it, and nobody agrees on exactly what are the ways. Alfred Kinsey, on his book in 1948 on sexual behavior of the human male, he wrote, certainly no aspect of human biology in our current civilization stands in more need of scientific knowledge and courageous humility than that of sex. So, we're here because of sex. Animals are here because of sex. Everything is here because of sex. And since the beginning of civilization, on the first ever rules of law, the Code of Hammurabi, these are stone plaques that they would write them down and grade them and put the rules of law of how to behave in town. They would put them all over Persia. And one of the things it say in there is that if a man takes a woman as a wife or have no intercourse with her, this woman is no wife to him. So sex has always been important in the history of civilization. If you look at some of the oldest human carving structures, these are two of them. Our Lady of Art, 35,000 years old, displaying the behind of a lady, and one of the 7 marbles of the old ancient history, the Diana of Ephesus, Artemisa, was a woman with a lot of breast. So everybody realized that breast, butt, everything, all of that is important in sex and reproduction. If you go to the Anthropology Museum in Athens, which is a museum that people overlook, because people go to Athens for a day in a cruise, they go to the Acropolis, they go to the Plaka Park, old city of it, and they don't go to the Anthropology Museum. It's a gorgeous museum that you can see in a couple of hours, and most of the most important Greek statues are there, including the god of Phallus is there. I wasn't interested in looking at it when I went in. Bill Bryson wrote an excellent book on small history of almost everything. And he described the beginning of reproduction in this way. At some point in an unimaginable past, 3.5 billion years ago, the first cell cleaved itself and produced a hair. It was the moment of creation for all of us. Biologists sometimes call it the big birth. I love this slide. I'm sorry it's in a foreign language, but I think it was the best one I used to show you how reproduction starts on individual cells. Division between two cells. You have a cell. It's split into a growth. Is a genetic material. It's split in two by mitosis, so now forms two identical cells. You can have gemation, which is you have a cell and a piece of it goes out. It has some genetic material. It eventually produces another cell. And then through spores. So when you look at beginning of life, mitosis was the first way in which cells started to divide. But gemation and sporulation was another way of reproduction. But that doesn't sound like a lot of fun, no, in terms of cells and sexual reproduction. But slowly, as colonies of microorganisms develop and they have exposure to different environments, those colonies develop some specialization. To develop specialization, they have to develop some organelles, activate some of the genetic material, and as specialization develops, they have to start exchanging genetic information, finding out ways to reproduce. I think this is one of the more sexy slides that I'm going to have here today. There may be some others. But it's showing how microorganisms can extend some filaments or protrusions on their membrane and do exchange. Years ago, this was thought to be something unusual. Now we know it occurs very frequently on microorganisms. So the ability of an organism to penetrate others for exchange of genetic material is one of the more basic and one of the most beautiful processes of life. And I don't know, I remember when I had my first girlfriend, I thought I had invented some techniques of postures and everything, and then you look around you and you realize that it's been there for a long time. The mating rituals, how if you look at animals, and there's a number of books on sexual selection in animals, and it's super interesting. The mating process, many of the ways in which reproduction is done. When you look at modern humans, and this is the kind of a family tree of the great apes, or which we are just part of their family, and we're over here, modern humans, and we are between the gorillas and the bonobos. The bonobos are small apes. There's not many of them remain alive, but they're the closest one to us. But when you look at the gorillas and you look at the bonobos, their mating rituals and their mating relationship, the bonobos are they're very much into sex. They meet you, they meet each other, they engage in sex. Male with male, female with female, male with female. They don't have a lot of fighting. They have a lot of sex. They solve everything through sex. They're very sexual, oriented, very peaceful. A group of apes. And then we have the gorillas. At our other side, there's a male-driven society where the male gorilla will kill for domination on their harem, on their crew, and dominate the whole. And I think we humans sometimes are kind of somewhere in between there. No? One of the big questions in human biology is monogamy. Is monogamy natural? Is it something that it was structured? Is it better for society? Certainly it's better for society to function through it. And Carl Zimmer, in an article, I don't know if you know, Carl Zimmer is one of the best science writers of these last 30 years. I had an article on the New York Times a couple of years ago on reproduction, and talking about monogamy, polygamy in particular. And he states, as our ancestors moved to more monogamous relationship, it allowed for better protection, survival, and nutrition, which could help explain our brain development above other mammals. Not the only reason that our human brain developed. There's a lot of theories and there's a lot of factors of our brain development, but some people on the field feel, that helps. When you can specialize in some areas, it can help mothers engage in reproduction. If you keep a good family, you need something good for society. I'm an heterosexual. As I always said, I've never seen a male butt that I find attractive. Not that there's anything wrong with it, but I just, so obviously growing up you think, well, homosexuality is something, it's just abnormal. How can that happen? How a woman can look at a woman and find it attractive? So the question is that normal? Is it abnormal? Is it a normal variation? No, and that's been a big question for society. Kingsley, on his report, he established 6 groups on sexual attraction. Exclusively heterosexual, which is the majority of humans. Predominantly heterosexual, but maybe an incidental homosexual encounter. Predominantly heterosexual, but more than an incidental encounter. Equally, heterosexual and homosexual, that's the pure bisexual. And honestly, through my 20s and 30s, I always thought bisexuality is a game, the closet, but the more you look at it, the more you study these people, and there's a lot of data to it, they do have attraction for both sexes. Then you have the predominantly heterosexual, but they may have an incidental, predominantly homosexual, but occasionally heterosexual contact, and so on, and then the exclusive homosexual. Other scientists have looked at they call it the 5 genders of the brain. Heterosexual is probably at least, and the numbers vary, and don't quote me on this, because it's hard to get the data. Okay? If I do a survey over here, say, okay, each of you, what about you? Are you gay? Oh no, I'm not. Well, have you had any homosexual relationship? No, me? Never. No. So it's very hard to get accurate data. But heterosexual, give or take, maybe 10%, 90% of the population. Homosexual, maybe about 7-8%. Bisexual, maybe about 1-3%. And then the transsexual and asexual are far less. Even though those transsexuals have been heavily in the news politically over the last couple of years, it's a very small, it's a 0.01% of the population that are transsexual. And there's a number of intersex conditions. There's a number of people that are born with both sexes. If you look at this, and I like this slide, these are the genitourinary system in embryo. If you look at males and females, they have their gonads that are going to develop into testes or ovaries. And they have the ducts. And then at one point in males, your XY, your male, male hormones start to raise, and the male hormones is what determine that embryologic organ that can go either way develop into male organs, with testicles that comes outside the body for a better temperature, and then the penis, so that develop to do male hormones, and then no male hormones will lead to female external genitalia. But there's a number of cases where people, is obviously not a big number, but not unknown, where you may be a male, but you don't have either a sensitivity to the male hormones, you don't have the production of male hormones, and then you develop external female genitalia. So those are the intersex conditions. Those are always difficult, particularly when they're diagnosed in early life, because as a surgeon, as a medical, as a parent, it's like, okay, is my daughter's son or a son a daughter, or and then what to do? How do you do that? And there's a number of sex changes that are done in early life, but the number of people whose bodies differ from the standard male or female account for 1 in 100 births. So it's not unheard. It's not super uncommon. And babies that get surgery to normalize their genital appearance are 1 to 2 in every 1,000 births. So it's not as uncommon as some people may think. So homosexuality, is it normal? Is it abnormal? We obviously touched a little bit on it. This is big studies. This was from Brinkman Human Sexuality Research. Lisa Diamond, some people said, well, she's gay, so her research is biased, but most people in their field consider her a good researcher. They look at data from 2011, males, 85 to 90% only attraction to the opposite sex. Same data in 2019. Females tend to have a little bit more of a fluidity. You know, you never hear a man say, oh, that man was so good looking. Yeah, such a good looking fellow. Yeah. You know, particularly when you're young. Women do have that extra attraction for females. They can recognize the male and female, and they seem to have slightly more, I'm not saying that too much, but a little bit of more of sexual fluidity. At least that's what, don't kill the messenger, I'm just passing you the information as I found. Okay? So, through generations, one of the questions regarding homosexuality has been, is it a mental illness? Is it something wrong with homosexuality? So, homosexuality does not cause a marked distress impairment that mental illness causes. In 1973, the Psychiatric Association eliminated, in the US, homosexuality from their disease manual. In 1990, the World Health Organization eliminated it from medical classification disorder. And even China declassified homosexuality as a mental illness in 2001. So I think when you look at not only us, but different countries and the World Health Organization, they recognize that homosexuality is a sexual variation. Pope Francis said, if someone is gay and he searches for the Lord and has goodwill, who am I to judge? We shouldn't marginalize people for this. They must be integrated to society, and I agree. Kingsley, on his book, he said, the only real sexual aberrations are chastised. You know, sex to injure, to induce pain and abstinence. That's his. This is, and I'm sorry, it's a lot of wording, but I'll give you the points for those sitting on the back. The DSM-5 is the psychiatric book of disorders. It's a book that categorizes different disorders. So this was published in 2013. They did a revision in 2012. And they, when you look at the section of sexual disorders, sexual dysfunction, paraphilic disorders, and then gender dysphoria. Sexual dysfunction, delayed ejaculation, female orgasmic disorder, arousal disorder, genital pelvic pain, those are sexual dysfunction. Paraphilic disorder, these are people that they get most of their sexual stimulation by looking at something, looking at picture, the exhibitionistic, you know, they have to show themselves off. Frotteurism, the people that, you know, have to be rubbing themselves all the time, masochism, sadism, pedophilia as a sexual disorder, no surprise for anybody, etc., etc. And then we have the gender dysphoria. Gender dysphoria are people that have their sex, they're not comfortable with it. So if I'm homosexual, you know, it's like, hey, I'm a man, I like to be a man, but I like men. They don't feel anything wrong with it. But the gender dysphoric patients are patients that I'm a man, but I'm a woman trapped into a man. I want to be a female. Okay, that's a dysfunction. So those not all the transvestite, but the people that want to switch sexes, that's considered a sexual dysfunction because it causes distress at your perception of your sexual persona or interest it's wrong. It's a sense of unease about a person's sex and identity. Okay. Another big question and sorry for the busy slide, you don't have to read it. But you know, I wanted to look at the topic of masturbation. Is masturbation wrong? Is it right? So I did what any good researcher would do. Is that let's Google it. Let's Google. So I did the Google. Is masturbation bad? So now you don't have to do the work, so you know it's not on your file, so all people checking your computer. But these are the things I found. Let me point a few things for you. Masturbation isn't unhealthy or bad at all. It can actually be good for your health. Masturbation is a healthy, natural, and safe way to practice self-care, they call it, and improve yourself. Masturbation effects on the brain. There's nothing inherently wrong about masturbation. Obviously, like everything, excesses are always wrong, you know. Is masturbation bad for you? This is from the Psychology Today. And the answer was no, despite what some people think, masturbation is not inherently bad for you. There was an article here from the Times of India. I did this presentation for the Medical Society. I made a lot of fun with my Indian friends over there. He said, yeah, it could hurt you if you do it too much, if you do it too repetitively. And that's both for male and female. So sexual stimulation, self-stimulation is nothing innate wrong with it, provided that you do it in moderation. Let me change the topics here. This is it's a super interesting diagram. This is a Leonardo da Vinci diagram on sexual intercourse. I don't know if you know this, but Leonardo da Vinci, I think everybody knows that he did a lot of anatomical paintings. Actually, he would pay his helpers to go to dig the bodies of the people that have been killed, bring his back to the lab, and he would dissect them. He would write instead of from right to left, from left to right, so nobody could read his writings. But most of his anatomical studies were lost in time. There were 200 of them that were lost. He would have been probably the most important person in human anatomy if it wasn't, because many of his paintings were lost until hundreds of years later. He did about 700 anatomical drawing. This is a hemisected, meaning halfway cut male, penis penetrating into the vagina, but it has some anatomical mistakes. The way the nerve were coming directly from the spine is not correct. The nerve goes from the spine to a plexus, and then they innervate it. And not only this was correct, but there's a lot of ideas about sex and reproduction that we have correct, that we have incorrect through the years. If you ask about a female genitalia anatomy, a survey of 100 males conducted for the Gynecological Cancer Awareness Month, they found that the majority could not reliably identify most parts on what's the vulva, what's the vagina, the external labia, the internal labia. You know, males don't know anything about it. They think they know it all, but they don't. And then there's that famous G-spot that I don't know, but everybody's been looking for the famous G-spot. So the G-spot was named after the German gynecologist Ernest Grafenberg, that's what they call it, the G-spot. He also contributed to the development of intrauterine device, and then people is like, oh, I know how to get the G-spot, you know, I'm the best one at getting the G-spot. Well, it turned out that in 2001, the G-spot was declared by the American Journal of OBGYN a modern gynecological myth. Now, there's a clitoris. That's another different thing. So the clitoris comes from the ancient Greek word clitoris, that means little hill, which it also some people attribute it to the word clays, which means key. I'll take either of those. Key, little hill, yeah. It's covered by a hood. The clitoris has long been misrepresented and misunderstood. The size is variable, and what we see is just the tip of the iceberg. The sole mission of the clitoris is to arouse sexual pleasure during sex. It's the most sensitive part of the body by far. There's nothing close to it. It has about 6,000 and 8,000 sensory nerves, more than any part of the body, including by far more than the penis, more than the testicles. And there have been some studies, really interesting, studies that I don't know who designed them. Again, I'm just a messenger. Looking at parts of the brain that get stimulated when you stimulate the clitoris, the vagina, the nipple. So now we have all of that set. We know what parts of the brain, not that it makes a difference, but that's interesting from the physiological point of view to understand why. Another big myth is the size of penis. So, in the 1950s, Kinley Institute did a research. They said, yeah, we need to get the average size of penis. When it's small, when it's engorged. And they erected the penis. They said it's about 5 to 7 inches. I don't know if they did it by surveys. Like, okay, what's your size? Oh, it's about 8 inches. What about you? 8.5. You know? Yeah. So what they did, 1997. They said, you know, we need to figure this out. I mean, this is a medical thing, it's a biological thing. We need to figure it out. So they did a survey of over 1,000 volunteers, and they put the size at 4.5 to 5.75 inches, a fairly notable demotion. So those of us that were like, yeah, I'm a horse, yeah, back up, you're a boy now. There's always, some variations. There's about 2 in 100 that have abnormally small ones. There's some that have abnormally big ones. But I think if you look at the famous David, I think it's a good reflection of what you see in nature. Yeah. What about the chemistry of sex? And that's really interesting. Because when you think that whatever is happening between your legs, most of it, we're good. Most of it happened between your ears. The perception of sex, the excitation, it happens due to neurochemical changes in the brain. So when you look at neurochemistry of the brain, there's a number of neurochemicals that are involved. Dopamine, the powerful dopamine-driven reward and pleasure system is activated in love and sex. Serotonin, we call it the mood molecule. It's one of the most important love chemicals. It keeps the subject of affection in our thoughts. And oxytocin is the bonding hormone. Oxytocin is really interesting because if there's a female delivering a baby, the time on a female where oxytocin goes high is at the time of delivery. So they're delivering the baby. After the baby is almost killed them for 9 months, and then the delivery is traumatic, it's painful, but when it comes out, the bonding hormone is really high, so that baby, that bonding is formed. I don't think if it was without the oxytocin at the time of birth, most women would say, take this parasite away from me. Don't want anything to do with it. Get it out, it's yours, take over. That doesn't happen in many cases because of oxytocin. Very interesting, the animal data on oxytocin, super interesting. Because most mammals that have been studied, they don't form monogamous relationship. There's a few exceptions to those. The penguins, for example, they mate together for that year. The next year, they come for the mating season, and they find somebody else, and they mate, and the same thing happens through the years. But some animals, like the prairie voles, have high levels of oxytocin. Those are one of the animals that form lifelong pairs. So we know oxytocin is super important. So with more oxytocin receptors, they tend to stay together with the mates. What about orgasm? What happened in orgasm? So orgasm is the biggest non-chemical blast of dopamine. The brains, the type of orgasm resembles. When you look at, and they've done some studies too, they've done some PET scan studies, looking at brains on drugs, looking at brains during orgasm. I don't know who volunteered for that one, but anyway, but they are very similar findings on the brain. Now you have to be careful with orgasms, because, I think most of my male friends, and I got the feeling a lot of people here, they think, no, my partner never done that to me. Never done that to me. But, according to a study from Temple University, about 60% of women have faked their orgasms at some point. The question is, why? Well, why are women pretending to get of it if they're not? And there's a lot of data on it, but sometimes they feel like, it kind of, if I'm not able to get it, but let me at least use this time to have that time of intimacy that we have. So there's not bad reason for it. Obviously, there are good reasons for it. So I don't want to make things complex, in part because I don't know this in detail, but when you look at the central effect of sexual function of neurotransmitters, estrogen becomes permissive. Testosterone helps initiate that drive. Progesterone leads to some increased receptivity together with some increased dopamine, increases that desire. Then prolactin comes in and norepinephrine goes in to build up that excitement. And then at the time of orgasm, oxytocin. Yeah. We will never love our wife more than at the time of orgasm. And so the question has been, well, if this is all controlled and adjusted by neurotransmitter, what about, are there any particular drugs that I can use that can make me function better, make us feel better? And obviously, a lot of people have asked that question. Alcohol, it decreases inhibitions. So maybe at the beginning, it make you feel more willing, but it tends to decrease sexual performance. I'm talking about one drink, but I'm talking about a few of them. So you may feel like when you're driving, you feel like you're driving good, but you're not. Marijuana, it may enhance the appreciation of sensory stimulation. Often with marijuana, it's very variable, the response that people get. One of the things that happen is that there's a little bit of a delay ejaculation, but at the time of ejaculation, it seems a little longer. So very different marijuana in how people respond to it, depending on their own chemistry. Cocaine, it increases energy, it increases sexual interest, and pressure can be amplified. It's a super dangerous drug, obviously, super dangerous for the heart. And then ecstasy, and I think we are, including myself from the population, where ecstasy was kind of a younger people thing. It was kind of a new thing from, 90s, early 2000s. It's a mood enhancer. If you go to a party where there's a lot of people on ecstasy, they all love each other. They're having a great time. They're very bonding. They're very welcoming. They're very, very, very warm. So makes people feel good, happy, relaxed, but it's not an aphrodisiac and can actually decrease sexual performance. So I'll go like Nancy Reagan said, just say no. Pornography, how bad it is. I think, like everything, a little bit may be good to get things started. Too much pornography is bad, particularly for adolescents, but for any age. Porn set unrealistic expectation of what real life sex is. It can chip away their partner's self-esteem and hurt their relationship. So they're all not a good idea. Smell. The most underrated of the senses. Oh, check the timing. I don't have my watch in hand, so when it's getting close to 10:30, you let me know.
No, I will.
Okay? Most underrated of the senses. And you know what? We choose our partners through smell. If you ever dated somebody that didn't smell good, it's a done deal. That's it. It's not going to work out. They may have a bigger nose, a shorter nose, they may be blonde, black hair, fat, skinny, you name it, more butt, less butt, big guy, big muscles, less muscles, more personality, nicer, more social, less social, all of that is workable. If they smell bad to you, that's done. It's a big one. There was an interesting study done a few years ago. This is all news, but for those that don't know about it, it's going to be interesting data. So they took 49 females, they were assigned to smell the t-shirts of 44 males. So they give this male these white t-shirts. They said, don't put any perfume, don't put any deodorant. When you go to bed, wear the t-shirt 2 nights in a row. They put the t-shirts. They put the t-shirts on the back. They got these 45 females to smell the t-shirts, and they asked them, so tell me, who do you think is your more attractive? Who do you think is more sexy? The questionnaire was excellent. You need to look at this study. It's really funny. Who would you rather have sex, go out, have a day? Who do you think is better looking, less looking? So based on the smell, have this questionnaire. And the woman, they rate the t-shirt on a scale of 1 to 10, intensity, pleasantness, sexiness. And what they found is that the women prefer smells of those that have immune system that is complementary to them. Wow. Everything goes back to forget about the big guy, the muscles, the big shoulders, the big chin, forget about anything else. They prefer scents of t-shirts that were worn by male whose immune system were complementary. So all of this is an evolutionary development in our sex and attraction. There's a lot of things that we sometimes don't notice. If I ask you who's more attractive of these two females, any comments here? The one on the right. Yeah, so the one on the right, obviously the same person. Here, the pupils are small. Here, those pupils are big, showing excitement, interest. So just the size of the pupil can cause a bit of an interest, or it can call the attention. Women, talking about vision, women are far better at picking up details on face. I always find funny because my wife asks me, how was she close? How did she look? And I say, I don't know. What about her eyes? I don't know. She was good looking. I know she was good looking. But tell me more, I don't know. So they have done studies, ophthalmological studies, where they take females, and they take males, and they give them the same time, I think it was 5 seconds, to look at a face. And they measure the eye movement. So woman, this is what they do. They start looking at the nose. Everybody starts at the nose. Look at the nose. Then they look at right eye, left eye, forehead, mouth. They have 17 different points. A woman look in 5 seconds. A male's eye, nose, eye. Maybe let's look at the lip and that's it. So women, they far. Well, I don't think this should come as a surprise to anybody. Yeah. Now there's a few things that male take a look at. There's a few things that when males see them, they'll take a look at it. That's one of them. But the other big one is the hip-waist ratio. Okay? So you look at males, look at a female, and they may be skinnier, really skinny, or more meatier, or a little bit more chubbier. But if they have a good waist to hip ratio, That's going to call the attention of the male predator. My father used to love Sophia Loren, and she was an old lady to me. I kind of never pay attention until I saw some of her pictures later on. And I remember looking at this picture and saying, oh, I see. Yeah, I can see why he loves Sophia Loren. That's a famous Indian sculpture, obviously, emphasizing that the importance of the attraction of the waist to hip ratio. You can tell that. So if you want to have your males wash their hands for sure, do what they did in this European bar. You know, they wanted to make sure everybody wash their hands, and I can assure you, the males will go there. Yeah, more soap. Yeah. One of the things people look, males, females, when we look at somebody and we think is attractive is symmetry on the face. That's a good one. And interestingly enough, during ovulation, the facial features tend to become a little bit more symmetric. I thought this was not true, but there's a lot of data to support that. And not only that, you take a 25-year-old lady that's maybe a little shy to a dancing club in the middle of her cycle, and you know, she does her moves, so and so, but you take her during the ovulation time, and her movements are going to be a little bit more sexy. There's a lot of studies looking into that. So they're more sexual in their dancing move during ovulation. The facial features are more symmetrical. There was an interesting study done in I don't know, New Mexico, I think it was, when they look at pole dancers, okay, topless bars, female, and they get more tips during their ovulation. So, now when people meet each other, there's some stages of flirting. Those stages of flirting are eye to body. You know, you do that. Check. You do the eye to eyes. You do the voice. The voice is like, hey, you know, I like the body, like the eyes. Let me get close and we look at it. Hand to hand. That's first touch. Ooh, that's an important part of the flirting process now. Arm to shoulder. That's a big one. Yeah. Arm to body. You know. And then the mouth to mouth. I have 3 daughters. I always tell my daughter, don't kiss on the first, second, third. You want to wait. You want to wait. Once you break that ice, that can start a problem. Hand to head, hand to body, mouth to breath, hand to genitalia, genitals to genitals. Those are the 12 stages of flirting. So if you ask young females and males, say, hey, can you tell me about when you first met your partner, about the flirting stages? And women are really good at going, I remember when I saw him first, and I remember he touched me at that time. They'll tell you the stories. The males, they remember from here now. So yeah, once you pass that stage of kissing, that's another game ball, you know. That's a different stage that often leads to other things. Now, sperm. Let's talk about sperm briefly. The average sperm contains about 40 million to 300 million sperm per milliliter. So when men throw their orgasm, unless they have like mere vasectomy, boom, so millions of sperm. And these are small, really small cells that carry just half of our genetic material. Interestingly enough, if you have less than 20 million of spermatozoids per milliliter of sperm, you're sterile. You probably won't reproduce. They are 15 to 20 associated with infertility. And you know, most of those sperms, we're so proud that, man, we throw that sperm in, but most of those sperms are abnormal. Yeah. My wife said, yeah, that's like just the regular males. About 30% of theirs are abnormal. That may be an overstatement. But about 30% of the sperms are abnormal. This is the normal one over here to the left. This one have a big head, small head, double tail, pointy head, and abnormal tail. So a lot of abnormality. The male are producing, and then when you try to produce things too quickly, mistakes happen. That happened when we produce terms. Women throw away one egg at a time, and they're maturing several eggs at the time of menstruation, and then boom, the good one comes always out, most of the time. The egg is 10 times the size of the sperm. This is from a microscopic picture. This is a gross of that good relatives about them. And the egg, actually the female egg, have all the basic material for reproduction. So when women tell you, you provide nothing to this kid, they have a point. Yeah. Males are so much into sex, but that's not only us. It had to do with it's our biology. It's not our fault. At least that's what we said. If you look at other animals, for example, sorry. Here we go. Female roundworms will always prioritize finding food over mating, while males will leave a food source to find a mate, even if they starve to death. That's biology. Maybe some of I don't know how many of you are locally Floridians, but those of us that spend a lot have spent, obviously, you can hear from my accent, I'm not originally from here, but most of us have been here for a long time. FSU is one of the places that, we look for our kids to go to school, Tallahassee is a good school, FSU. Go to school. They did a psychological study in FSU. They took really good-looking males, they took really good-looking females, and then they have these really good-looking females approaching the guys. So we'll come to them and say, hey, listen, I've been watching you for a while, I really like you, my partner is out, I'm free on my apartment, why don't you come over? Guess what happened? All of them say yes. And they did the same with females. Good-looking guys, pleasant-looking guys, not wrong, not bad-looking guys, really-looking guy. And none of the females approach would agree to that. So women obviously are more selective, not that surprised anybody. I'm a neurologist, as a neurologist, I like to know how the brain works. No? That's a tough thing. There's, 100 billion nerve cells, 300 billion synapses, 100 neurotransmitters. Every single cell connects with 5 to 10 other thousand cells. So if I tell you, I'm a neurologist, I know how the brain works, don't believe it. Yeah, don't believe it. But there's some basic things. We have the brainstem, we have the limbic system, and we have the cortex. Okay? I think you all know that. So the brainstem is called the reptilian brain. You look at the reptiles, they have an equivalent brain to our brainstem. Reflexes. So you have a lizard, they either mate, run, escape, attack. That's their response. Okay? Now, mammals develop a limbic system. It's an emotional system. So they're able to get some cues. So for example, if I am a lamb and I'm here, and I'm looking at a lion there showing me the teeth, I know it's not smiling at me. They want to eat me. So mammals are recognizing clues in movement. That's the limbic system. It's the emotional system. Clues in voice, in tone, in looks, in posture. If I'm standing like this, I'm aggressive. If I'm going like this, I'm shy. That's part of the limbic system. All mammals have it. And then we have the neocortex. The neocortex basically is the cognitive function. And the bottom line of this, that have to do with sex, is that when impulses and reflexes get activated, they dominate. You wonder, why did this guy get into that relationship? What did you do that? It was an impulse because when the cognition, the part of the brain that tells you, no, that is wrong to do that. But the emotions tell you, I don't know, maybe I can do that. and their impulses tell you, oh yeah, I want to do that, people go for it. But that's how, the basic way of how the brain works: brainstem, reflexes and impulses, limbic system, emotion, brain cortex, cognitive function. And as Charles Darwin said, the very essence of instinct is that it's followed independently of reason. Then, you know, we males and females, we look at things very, very, very differently. We think we know what women like. We think, but no, we don't. We don't know. We don't know what women like. And that's obviously not new. You know, they like things like that. You know, cute, good looking. They like that big symmetrical face, a big jaw. You know, the portrait of wealthy also helps. You know. But another thing women like, there's some studies, particularly younger people, maybe not our age group. I don't know an age group, but they kind of like facial scruff. Particularly women in ovulation. You take a 60 to 30-year-old woman during ovulation, and these two good-looking guys, you know, that guy that looks a little bit edgy with a little bit of a facial hair, they kind of like that little bit of facial hair. The other thing they like, whether we guys with good hair like it or not, they like baldness. They think baldness is sexy, and so a lot of sexy guys here. Yeah. So you think that all the baldness is undesirable for men, so they have shown that it does have some positive effect. Baldness are perceived as more intelligent, dominant, with more sophisticated potential than guys with hair. I was always so proud of my thick hair. Should shave it, I guess. Yeah, so what do we like? What do women like? This is what we like. They like those the facial hair, the big shoulders, the strong muscle guy. We like that, curvy figures, you know. Again, and I'm not being a physical guy, but I mean, I think when people look just physical at the type of attraction, this is kind of what people like. We look at things in very, 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 very different way. Now, this one is a really serious topic. Sexual education. And this state, obviously, is a good example, but I think if you look at different countries, they have, all countries have no sexual education, some sexual education appropriate starting at about 8th grade. There's a group called the Guttmacher Institute. The Guttmacher Institute have done studies looking at, you know, is it good, is it bad? And obviously there's always people that fall off the norm, but sexual education has to be taught at an adequate level, starting since pre-puberty. The children should learn the body parts and function. At 16, some people say that's a little late. Yep. It's important to teach to achieve fulfilling sex and the dangers of sex. Yep. There's no clear evidence that sexual education programs can help young people delay sexual activity. So some of the people that like to teach say, oh, you can control it more. There's some debates to that. And different countries have looked at different things. But there's no country. You look at Germany, Austria, Japan, China. They all have their protocols on their school system of how to do sexual education, but they don't necessarily follow them. So this is a worldwide problem on how to establish this. And I guess the Stork version is less complicated. The pill, there's a lot of debate in this country also, you know. It should be, well, there was a lot of debate back in the 60s actually, in the 1950s. Studies were developed of using the pills. There was a lot of opposition in the US to developing hormones to control contraception, because that's something that supposedly, according to some, only God can control. So there's a lot of negative studies. So they went to my homeland, Puerto Rico, to do some of the studies on the pill. So the women there were greatly open. It's like, yes, I already have 5 children. My mother had 11. I want to build that study on the pill, not to have any more children, because my husband don't want to stop. So by the mid-20th century, with improvement in sanitation and antibiotic therapy, families didn't need to have many children. I mean, when you think about 1800, 1900, early 20th centuries, you have 5 children, 2 survive, 3 survive. But that started to change with the vaccine. So every good thing comes with some bad things, I guess. And then they did the studies on the 60s, it got approved, and now it's widely available in most places. Hugh Hefner declared that the pill and sexual revolution changed sex from procreation to recreation. Contraception in adolescents, what's recommended nowadays. Recommendation published 10 years ago by the American Academy of Pediatrics, they endorsed implantable birth control as a first line. And most of my friends that have adolescents, they have that conversation. It's like, you know what? You're about to college, they become sexually active, let's do some ways of so that's the choice. And actually the College of OBGYN, Obstetrics and Gynecology, also recommended that as a first line a little bit in 2005. Where do people meet and how our relationships come together is changing, obviously, through time. If you look at the 1940s, people would meet in school with friends in church. And then through, in a bar or a restaurant, by neighbors, church, I think it's right here. And then as time goes by, since 1980, online, through the internet. So how do people meet? It's changing a lot, and that's causing a little bit of a difficulty sometimes. Because if you look at from 2007 to 2009, 21% of heterosexual couples, 61% of homosexual couples met online. Women prefer men, and they look at this stuff, they prefer men to be tall and wealthy. They have stronger preference for income over physical attributes, or they haven't seen them. So it's like, you know what, if I'm going to get myself with another man, I want me to cook for him, clean for him, at least, I don't want a guy that I'm going to have to pay for him. I don't blame them. 81% misinterpreted their height, weight, or age. Few were willing to express political preference. And men, they like women that drink. They like women that drink. Anyway, we cover a lot of data, but just to leave you with just kind of some important and serious thoughts. Not that everything else has been serious, but what's the importance of intimacy? And intimacy, I'm not talking about only intercourse, but the hugging, the warmth, the getting together. It relieves stress, it improves immunity. It burns calories, improves cardiovascular health, it boosts self-esteem, improves intimacy, reduces pain. Yeah, reduces pain. That's our joke. I used to have 3 partners. 2 of them have wives that have migraines. And we would tell them, you need to tell your wife that intimacy is good to reduce your headaches, you know. It reduces the risk of prostate cancer, it strengthens the pelvic floor muscle, it helps you sleep better. Other than hurting your back if you get too wild, but you know, most of the, a lot of good positive things about sex. Most Americans remain sexually active into their 60s, and nearly half of them continue to have regularly into their 70s. Sex protects against the aging brain, so intimacy, it's important. I don't want to cause any problems in your house. I'm just giving you the data here. But remember this. You have to remember this. Sex at an advanced age is like playing pool with a rope. So you need to take advantage of it while you can. Again, I'm not an expert on this. If you want some expert information, I think she passed away last year. Dr. Ruth, I still laugh so much on her videos. They are amazing. You can find them on YouTube. You should look at Dr. Ruth Frank talk on YouTube. They're kind of the new generation. Dr. Ruth is a lady by the name of Esther Perel. She looks a little older nowadays. This was probably 15 years old. She wrote this bestseller called Mating in Captivity, captivity being in a partnership. You know, why the importance of strengthening the partnership, relationship. Really, really, really good book on it. Love is a vessel that contains both security and adventure. Commitment offers one of the greatest luxuries of life, time. Marriage is not the end of romance, it's the beginning. And I think I got it, and thank you so much for your attention. You've been a great audience. As my wife when we were young. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
To do very shortly, actually, like right now, it is.
I'm always scared about the questions when I do this lecture.
Oh, is that going to go on so long?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. No, but I mean, we can take any questions or comments or discussion now.
Well, you do have to leave, though. You said 10:30, so
Yes, ma'am. Go ahead.
Doug, rule of the mic. You need to be heard.
Because you're so perfect and everything is so good. I just want to mention that your little synopsis on boldness is bold. Bold, like bold men and boldness.
So I have spelled it wrong.
Well, you forgot the A.
Okay. Thank you so much. I'll check it out. I'm a terrible speller.
No.
Yeah, actually, I'm terrible in languages. Actually, my only C in college was in Spanish. 101, and I tell you, my wife, every time I'm going to do a presentation, my wife is hysterical. She's like, "Did you check those slides? Did you check the wording?" I said, "Why did you check them?" But thank you so much. I'll check it out. I appreciate that. Yes, sir.
You talked about the pill, and there's two pills. One that women take early in life, and another that men take later on in life. How has that changed the world?
I tell you, I always remember when Viagra came out, I was like, I don't need it yet, but so glad that it's over there. When Viagra came out, it came out to the market. The typical patient that would come to the office would be the wife coming first, saying, "My patient's going to ask you about Viagra, don't give him any." And then the husband would come later on, would say, "Doctor, I don't like to talk about this, but I'm not what I used to be. I mean, I'm still good. I'm not what I used to, because men are always good, still good." So it's good. You have to be careful, obviously, with some antihypertensive medications. It should be a couple decision. Maybe if the relationship's still active, maybe sneaking one every once in a while. I don't know, may not be wrong from my biased opinion. Again, I'm not an expert. But it's been interesting. And then you have the Cialis, you have the long-acting, they last 3 days. I thought that you're going to have a encouragement for 3 days, but when the motivation comes, you have more readiness. So it's been interesting, particularly for males. I'm not sure for some females too. Yes, sir.
So I was going to ask you an immunology question about how people can be more compatible immunological based on experiments, but I'll ask you a neurology question.
Thank you.
So it's often quoted as serotonin, dopamine, oxytocin to be important, but as a neurologist, you know that, like treating Parkinson's patients, that blood levels of dopamine don't correspond to dopamine levels in the brain and their effect. So how do we measure oxytocin levels and their effect if we don't biopsy the brain at the time? How do we know that oxytocin or serotonin is actually effective?
That's a good question. The oxytocin levels have been in the blood. They could be a loose correlation in the brain, but it doesn't correlate exactly. And I think the point you make about dopamine is absolutely true. And the thing about dopamine, for example, is that you have dopamine, but then you have, I think it's about 5 different receptors, D1, D2, D3, D4, D5, and they have different functions. And then there's some areas of the brain that some of them can be affected. So depending on your dopamine needs, and your dopamine deficiency is going to be some of your symptoms. So it's hard to measure exactly how those things are exactly working in the brain. We know those through blood tests. There's a few spinal fluid tests, but it's hard to get that on the spinal fluid, and that still may not correlate exactly. The big change on understanding this have been through the PET studies, where they do infusion of dopamine agonists, they measure brain PET scans, they done some studies looking at people having orgasm, having sex, having masturbation, looking at pornography on their PET scans. And super interesting study. There's a book. If you like the topic, everybody likes it. Don't you have other things important and more serious to read? But there's a book by Mary Roach. Yeah. Mary Roach is she's a funny Californian writer, and I think the book is Bonk. Yeah. And it's easy reading, a lot of data on how they did the studies. So I would encourage you to look into that. But thank you for the question. Yes, sir.
One of the slides said that I think it was intelligent men have stronger sperm. Is that what it said?
That's what it said.
What's the thinking there?
I don't know. I don't know how they were able to obtain the data. I didn't look at that data. This
Sounds self-explanatory.
This presentation, I've been kind of putting it together for a long time. So there's some data that I haven't reviewed that data to give you a good answer, but that's an interesting question. One more question, maybe two, I think I'll have to leave.
Yeah, just here, yeah.
Okay, one maybe piece of trivia, the picture of the statue of the Greek goddess or whatever that looked like she had many breasts. I've read research on that was actually a lot of bull testicles. Yes. That they had some ceremony that involved killing out bulls, and that was part of the deal.
I didn't know that.
Thank you. Is that they have found a good cure for erectile dysfunction that involves diet and exercise. The problem is getting your wife to do it.
We'll take a last question over there, and I'm sorry I have to rush out.
Thank you. Yeah, you said in the T-shirt test that it was the one who had a complementary immune system that was the most likely attractive. Okay, so isn't that like saying your brother is, like you all had mumps and measles together or something? That's what do you mean by complementary immune system?
So that was a very good study because they did,
Good luck with that in 30 seconds.
They did that looking. So when you look at the immune system, you look at B cells, T cells, white blood cells in general. But you look at a lot of immune markers, interferons, interleukin are chemicals that the white blood cells use to communicate with each other. They're like so they look at interleukin levels. So they felt that. And if you look at immunity, you look at different populations, there's a little bit, not tremendous, but a little bit of a decrease, a change in immunity to certain diseases and certain conditions. So but they did that looking at that, looking at the levels of white blood cells, the B cells, T cells, the subsets of those interferon, interleukin. I don't know if they look at immunoglobulins or something else. But I remember that when that study came out, it was all over the news, psychology news, but it was all over the news. And I remember, I was working on this conference already, and I felt at the time that the data was really good. But you can look, if you look at the T-shirt test, you'll find that data.
As I recall, Jose, they actually, part of that was HLA compatibility.
HLA, thank you. Thank you so much.
Which is a heritable component.
Thank you again.
Get on the road. Yeah. If y'all want to stick around, we have getting his stuff together. The thing that came to my mind when I heard the talk was the other day when I was playing golf with mixed group, men and women, and as usual, I screwed up my approach shot to the green. And I turned to one of the women and I said, you know, I just had terrible depth perception. That's a problem. She said, oh, I understand that. We women typically have bad depth perception too, because we're always being told that this is 6 inches. All right. Jim, you want to give the announcement about the poolside?
Very quickly, we had a lot of results from the survey we sent out that we had quite a few responses with regard to, among other things, having a informal chat by the pool. Mike Enright, who just left, did this often in COVID, and so this is sort of a Mike Enright follow-on tribute, if you will. But on the 4 Sundays, we have some folks that are volunteers who are interested in starting out leading a informal chat, and the subject may be TBD. Start out with a subject and then let it flow into what the general folks attending are interested in talking about. So extremely informal, just to get together of humanists, like-minded people that want to talk to each other and get to know each other and establish a little bit more community. So we're going to do that at 10 o'clock out by the pool here. Inclement weather may occasionally pop up. We're trying to mitigate that, find a way to mitigate that. But we're going to start next week.
I'll leave it up to you to do the weather mitigation. All right. I want to thank Pam again for the setup and Gene. One of the things that you all need to understand is that we have to provide the coffee and the snacks, and donations to help cover the cost of those are good. We are not provided the coffee by the center. You know, we have to bring that in and start it up ourselves. And Gene, thank you so much, for your technical expertise. The next meetings of this club, he said, grabbing his cheat sheet, will be after the poolside chat on February the 2nd at 10 o'clock again. We're not redoing the 9:30. Some of you will be relieved to know. 10 o'clock, February the 2nd, Bob Altabello, who is a retired professor of philosophy and an excellent speaker, is going to talk about Roman Stoicism and how that actually relates to some current issues. Then the next meeting will be on the 9th, which will be our social Sunday that Pam is in charge of and is in the process of organizing, I believe. That also will be at 10. The next meeting of the Freethinkers group is on the 23rd, this week, Thursday at 3:30 p.m. at Aviary, where Mark Welton will talk about the rule of law principles and challenges, which of course is always a current topic, and I think would be enjoyable. Thank you all for coming.